Welcome back to the Ariadne Project. My name is Kera Marie, and I am here again with Tania Tuck. Welcome back, Tania.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Tania and I are collaborating here for the next several weeks. We are doing a series that Tania is an emotional wellness coach and a certified DiMartini method facilitator. And this overlaps with my interests as an empowerment artist and even my intention behind this entire podcast, that Tania and I are both passionate about putting actionable steps in our own hands and offering those kinds of tools to others so that we all can live our most empowered lives. So in our first episode of this series, we covered the concept of stress. What is good stress? What is bad stress? How does it affect us? And so the top question coming in from that episode was, when do I know when I have gone from that good stress and gotten out of balance and moved into this bad, unhealthy stress? So Tanya's here to start by answering this question on stress.
Thank you. Yes, and it's a very good question because as we talked about, you do need some level of stress when you're living your life and being active and achieving things. So the piece to think about is the feedback. Remember, I was saying there's 3 areas that you carry your stresses in: physically, in your body; chemically, in what you're doing in your environment, what you take in your body and what you have outside your body; and then also in your emotions. So when you are overstressed, one or other of those is going to give you feedback. So if you are finding yourself having physical symptoms, your body is basically telling you you're out of balance. So the way to then think about that is, okay, so what am I eating at the moment? What am I smoking? Am I drinking? Am I doing any other thing that is causing my body to just say, all right, you've tipped the balance? So that would be my answer. You're listening to your body's feedback, and also you're trying to identify what is it that's the additional piece that's too much. And it just might be that you've added worry now into your thing. So it's an emotional piece. And so that's what I would suggest is to just, you're going to name it. You're going to find out, what have I added in that is different than before? And then you need to just tweak everything to rebalance those 3 areas. Is that a good answer?
Awesome. Okay, so check in with our bodies, see what the feedback is coming in from that, and identify how we're coping, and then to give ourselves the things that we need in a healthier way.
Rebalance. If you can't rebalance your emotions in that moment, make sure you're not eating stuff that's going to cause even more pressure.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Rebalance in a healthy way. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for weighing in on this question about stress. And in these subsequent episodes, we're going to be talking about specific kinds of stressors. And today we are getting right into it. We are here to talk about shame and guilt. This is a pretty universal human experience. But Tania, why do we experience shame and guilt?
Well, I'm going to start each of these sessions by giving us all a clue into universal laws that run us personally as human beings, but run the world, run the universe, run the planet, run everything. And the first law, which is related to shame and guilt, is the law of polarity. And the law of polarity states that you cannot have a positive without a negative, and that everything comes with its equal and opposite. So I'd like you to just think about certain things that you could imagine that gives you a visual. So a magnet, for example, we all know from our science lessons that there's a positive end and a negative end. But if you were to actually shave off a piece of that magnet, it would still, even in the slimmest part, have a positive and a negative. Also, if you think about a cell in a body, in our body, in any living thing, there's a cell, and at the very center of a cell is a positive and negative part to it. And even the smallest thing that we've actually identified, a photon of light at the very center, guess what? There's a positive and negative. So I'd like to suggest that we aren't above having positive and negatives in our lives. And, and a very good image of that is the Chinese yin yang sign with the black and white circles with the dots of the opposite colors in there. Those are great imageries to have in your mind when you're considering this idea of, okay, so there's always going to be a good, bad, positive, negative. So yes, so when you think about something happening as a happy, joyful, successful event, there's also sorrow and sadness and failure in that same event. So you've got the polarity there. If you are only seeing one side, then you're not actually seeing that it's in balance. You're not seeing the event for truly how it holistically is. So when you feel shame and guilt, you're basically perceiving that there are more drawbacks, disadvantages, negatives to others through your actions, thoughts, or what you've said. Okay, so you might have said something that's caused a big hoo-ha in your family, and now you feel shame or guilt. Okay, so the difference between shame and guilt is that shame is where you're judging yourself, and guilt is where you perceive judgment from others, or from your society, or from your religious group, or something like that. But the good thing to know about shame and guilt is that they're an inside job. Okay, so no one else can make you feel guilty or feel shame. These are feedbacks from you to yourself about integrity, and it's linking into what's important to you, what your values are. And as I say, no one can make you feel guilty unless in your own self you've triggered something about it. The problem with guilt and shame is usually when you carry those in you, it makes you play small. So you stop expressing yourself in the way you might. You stop showing up in the way you might. And sometimes you stop doing something completely because you don't feel worthy, because you're carrying this shame and guilt inside you. And you might not even know why you feel this way. You just do. Does that resonate with you?
It absolutely does. I see how the shame and guilt thing has played out in a lot of different ways in my life. One particular example is when I was married. It was a really toxic, unhealthy relationship for me, but this idea of guilt, like feeling like others are going to judge me, that within my community, the idyllic, way that you're raised, like, oh, because you're going to be married forever, this fairy tale kind of story, these kinds of things, this kind of influence in my life made me feel like I was injecting other people's values into my own world, that it would be better for me to stay in a marriage that was destroying me, as opposed to being a divorced person, that it would be more shameful to be divorced than to stay and just endure this. And I realized I had to get to a point where, yes, I was feeling all this shame and guilt for not having this perfect marriage, or it turned out this particular way, that it must be my fault. It's like, that's me judging myself and taking on these other values. It had to get to a point for me where my own value of being safe and well as a single divorced person, that had to rise to the surface for me, that became a more important value to me than maintaining some kind of appearances. And it really came down to, it's like, I can choose to stay and either end up addicted to something or end up being dead, or I can know that people are going, sometimes it is perceived judgment, sometimes they'll straight up tell you, I'm judging you, but either way, it's like, is it better for me to live with my own values as a safe and healthy person. So
Yeah.
I definitely see how this plays out in so many ways in my own life.
Yes. And, sometimes the guilt or shame is very difficult to place because you've just been brought up with a set of rules for so long. They're not even, they're not written anywhere. It's just everyone assumes a certain way of being. And when you choose in your own world, in your own identity, to choose to do something differently, it's only then that it awakens that somehow, I'm doing something against others' beliefs, or I'm doing something against, I'm knocking the system. And that's what triggers the shame or guilt.
Absolutely. I definitely realize that's a huge part of where that originated from me. But then what do you do to actually reduce and dissolve this shame and guilt?
Well, so the very first thing, as I think I'm going to have a common theme in these series, is that you've got to name it. Because as I was saying, if you've been brought up in a society where there's a certain set of rules that you are overstepping, you might not have named which particular thing it is that you've done that's, in quotes, so wrong. So what I'd like anyone who feels any shame or guilt is to get really clear on what it is that they've done or not done, or said or not said, or in their world, and then what is it that who was the person that they feel guilt towards? Was there a person, or is it a group? Is it the religious group that you belong to that you feel guilt towards, a general thing, or is it one specific person? Or it might be both. It might be my mother and my religious group. You need to identify every single aspect of this, because if you don't, it's just this feeling that is nebulous and you can't actually grip it and go, okay, it's this, and it's this action that I took that makes me feel guilty to this person or these people. Okay, so I've got an example here. Okay, so I had a client who went to Las Vegas recently, and they checked into the hotel, and the hotel then took the deposit, which actually ate all of the money that she had decided she was going to take. And so she turns up basically a pauper at a place where you need some cash. And so she felt shame that she hadn't managed to organize herself better, and guilt that she was having to ask her friends to give her some money. And so we got very clear on those two pieces, and then we looked at, firstly, how much shame she had and how much guilt she had. And then we looked at the question to then ask is, so we're perceiving the drawbacks and the disadvantages of this thing. So what are the benefits and what are the advantages of this happening, this particular event happening? And so in this case, it was towards her friends. So she could see that, okay, because I didn't come with enough money, my friends had to, they had an opportunity to share their love with me by being able to give me some money to enjoy while I was there. They felt important. It showed my client the level of their friendship, the level of, this wasn't just, a superficial thing. This was something that actually showed their love and care to her. And it also just made their bonds a whole load better. So we continued looking at all the different ways that this worked until she said, okay, no, I can see how this was perfect. I can see how it would have been, that none of this would have happened. She also saw how they did different things because they didn't all have as much money as they'd hoped. So they actually didn't just stay gambling. They went and did other activities, which actually meant that they had more fun. And when she could see that, and she could see how that actually they bonded better together, and it meant that other people bonded together better as well, because they were friends that didn't know each other. She was clear. She could say, oh, it was great. That event needed to happen the way it did. I don't feel shame or guilt about it anymore. So the homework for anybody who would like to do this is to get very clear on what their shame or guilt is about and who's involved. And then they need to just check in. How much out of 10? If 10 out of 10 was, I feel total shame and guilt about this, then it's a 10. But, find out, are you an 8 or you're a 9? Find out how much that is affecting you, and then basically find the benefits and advantages to yourself and others that this event happened, and then just check in. Oh, well, I feel less. Okay, now I'm at a 3. And so you're basically looking at the event till you can see how there was perfection in it, because the event itself has positive and negatives in it. If I come back to the law, that means that the event itself was neutral. There is nothing that was out of place there. It's in our perception of the event where we judge ourselves and we feel judged by others, that we bring up the shame and guilt in our lives. How's that sound?
Awesome. Yeah, that I really like this assignment, that we can all take this through the week. That again, to go back to my own example, it's like, okay, what is that polarity? Like, was being in this marriage for all this time all bad? And it's like, well, that actually, it educated my empathy. It, if it had just been mediocre or whatever, I'd probably still be there now. Like, it had to get me to a point of rock bottom that I would leave. And that's actually opened up a lot more opportunity in my life to step into my true power and to become a higher, better version of myself, that I can now acknowledge this as an important life experience that has really allowed me to step into the work that I'm doing now. It's like, why is this such a high priority for me? Why are my values this way? It's because that's where the voids were. And so I definitely will be doing this homework assignment as well this week. When I feel shame and guilt pop up, I'm going to put it on that scale and see where it balances out.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody who's joined us today to get a better idea of what these universal laws are and how to really start breaking down these universal stressors like shame and guilt. And if you have a particular question that you would like to ask Tania on this subject, please comment in the podcast. We will be making this available on Facebook. Comment there. We will take this top comment and question and answer that in the beginning of our next episode. And so, Tania, tell us, what is our next episode? What are some of the next subjects that we are getting into after shame and guilt today?
Well, so I'm looking at the different pieces that I see with my clients and show up in my own life. One of the biggies is depression. And I think in society, it's a major stress that we have in our lives. So I'd like to unpick that a bit, if that's all right. Next time, that will be our next topic, to give you some tools to be able to handle.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is another really important subject to address. And so join us back next week. We will again have some new tools to really look at depression in a different way and how do we move forward with it. Thank you, everybody who has joined us today on the Ariadne Project. This is Kera Marie and Tania Tuck.
Bye for now.